So today I'm going to show you how to use a percent bar graph. So let's say we wanted to find 24% of 75. So the way that we learned to do this before was to remember that 24% is like 24 out of 100%. 24% of is times 75. And again, I float my 75 to remind myself that it's actually over 1. Now I'm going to reduce my fraction by dividing both 75 and 100 by 25. 25 goes into 75 3 times, and 25 goes into 100 4 times. Now I'm going to further reduce my fraction because 4 goes into 24, so 4 goes into 4 once, and 4 goes into 24 6 times. So that leaves me with 6 times 3, or 18. So 24% of 75 is 18. But there are other ways to think about and to model this problem. So I'm going to introduce you to something called a bar model. A bar model is going to have percentages on one side and absolute values on the other side. So there are my percentages. My bar model starts at 0 on the bottom and goes up to 100%. So what do you think each of those lines is going to represent in this particular bar model? That's right. Each line is going to represent 25%. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. 25%, 50%, 75%. Now, on the other side, I'm going to have just the amounts. So we wanted to find 24% of 75. So my total amount, is going to be 75. So it goes from 0 to 75. Now, we want to find 24%. So I'm going to put 24% on my bar model. And it's going to be just underneath the 25% line. And I'm going to put that in another color so you can see. So there's 24%. But I want to know what 24% represents as a percentage of 75. So that's going to be whatever x is. So now I'm going to write a proportion. And I'm going to remember that my proportions, well, a proportion is one fraction set equal to another equivalent fraction. So I'm going to use the notion of part over whole. And I'm going to do part over whole with my number is going to equal part over whole with my percent. And unfortunately, I'm getting a little squinched there. Part over whole with the number equals part over whole with the percent. So my part with the number is going to be x. Over whole is the complete amount. So 75 is going to equal part over whole of my percentage. So part is 24% over the whole amount, which is 100%. So there you see, I've used my bar graph, my bar model, to write a proportion. And now I can go ahead and solve my proportion like I would solve any other proportion. So I'm going to think about cross products here when I'm solving my proportion. And I'm going to say 100x equals 24 times 75. And now if I divide both sides of my equation by 100, I get that x equals 24 times 75 over 100. Which is the same equation that I ended up solving up here. So the answer is going to be the same. X is going to equal 18 when I simplify that whole equation. And does that make sense? Well, let's see. We have about 4 of those, right? So 4 times 18, well, 4 times 10 is 40, and 4 times 8 is 32, and 40 plus 32 is 72. So it gets me to about 75 because it's not exactly a quarter, but it's just a little less than a quarter. So just estimating, that feels like a reasonable answer to get there. Okay, so let's look at another one of these problems. I'm going to draw the bar model and then use the bar model to write a proportion. So this time, the question is going to be, what percent of 7 is 4? Now this is set up differently than the kind of question we asked before of what is X percent of something. But now it's saying what percent of 7 is 4. This is a different kind of question. So our first approach that we learned is not going to work here. However, our bar model approach is going to work for any kind of percentage problem. So let's draw a bar model. So I can always draw my rectangle and add these 3 numbers here, right? I know that my bar model is always going to go from 0% to 100%. And I know that my number amount is going to start at 0 and go up to something. So I can do that when I start any bar model. Now I want to go ahead and add the information from our problem. So what percent of 7? So 7 must be the whole thing. What percent of 7 is 4? 7 must be the total. So I'm going to go ahead and add 7 up at the top of my bar model. All right, but I want to know what percent of 7 is 4. So 4 is my amount. That's a piece of 7. So I'm going to put in my 4. And then I don't know the percentage. That's what I want to know. So what percent? I'm going to represent that by an X. That's the thing that I want to find. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up my part over whole equals part over whole proportion. So my part in numbers over my whole in numbers is going to equal my part as a percentage over my whole as a percentage. All right, so now let's go ahead and put in the numbers from the problem. My part number is 4 over my whole number is 7. 4 over 7 equals my part percentage is X and my whole percentage is 100. My whole percentage is always going to be 100. So this is going to equal X over 100. Now I can solve my proportion. I'm going to solve it using cross products. So 4 times 100 equals 7 times X. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 7. And I'm going to get 400 divided by 7 equals X. And that's going to be my percentage. I put that into my calculator, 400 divided by 7, because 400 over 7 is just 400 divided by 7. And I get 61.14 blah, 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 blah. So that's going to be about 61%. Now, notice that normally when we put division problems into the calculator, we get a decimal, which we then have to multiply by 100 to get the percent. But the way this is set up, our X is already a percentage. So we don't have to multiply by 100. The X is already the percentage. So X is approximately equal to 61%. And obviously, we don't have to multiply that by 100 because 4 is not going to be 6,100% of 7. But 61% of 7, that looks pretty good. So we can fill in that our X is approximately 61%.